And I think what we always want to recognize is we're preparing our child for the rest of their life, not the rest of ours. We're wanting to make sure that we're establishing these situations and are helping them to understand things and are helping them to see that life isn't always going to be the same. It's not always going to be predictable. And what can you do when life doesn't feel predictable?
Emotional algebra, where the heart meets the math. What is erode's derivative as you figure out your path. Power plus emotions equals more than you can see. Listening to the wisdom.
Welcome to Emotional Algebra with Dr. E. I'm Andrew Tavani, your co-host.
And I'm Dr. E.
Dr. E, good to see you again.
Good to
see you. A little bit of
news.
Can I break some news here?
Yes, you can.
A little bit of news, a little sad news, actually.
Yeah.
Sorry to say.
Yeah.
For those watching, this will be my last episode co-hosting with the great Dr. E. It's been quite a run that we've had. And
absolutely.
First of all, I just want to thank you for letting me join you on this ride, because it's been very enlightening, insightful, and you and I have just gotten to know each other and become very friendly. So I'll miss doing it, but part of what's happening is just getting more professional work on the side that is taking up my time, not allowing me much time to do this or spend time with my kids and be a dad and all that sort of stuff. So that's why I have to step back a little, but I regret that I have to do so. And thank you for letting me join you on this. It's been great.
You've done a great job. You've been a great partner, and I would say more than friends. I would say, we're kind of got a brotherly relationship.
Yeah.
So.
Yes.
So, but and then here we are starting season 3, and so we get to at least have this discussion of your exit because of the demands of life, and that's totally understandable. And I've appreciated your dedication and time to the podcast, and look forward to the future, and also to hear and continue to stay in touch with you.
Yeah, of course.
Your future and where things are going.
Yeah. And you said season 3, first episode. It's really amazing that how many episodes we've done and just how far we've come with it. And in some ways too, with this episode, we're going right back to our roots with a big PowerPoint that you're going to show, which I think is really interesting, by the way.
Yep. And I also have some awesome news to share too.
Oh, yes.
Subscriptions are increasing, as well as I surpassed 1 million views as of December, in the month of December. So that's a pretty big landmark. So a couple of things. 80% of podcasts, I guess, don't get past 20 episodes, and we've done many more than that. And very few YouTubers are making it past 1 million views, and we've done that. And what's really pushed it is the music, and the music also hopefully is driving people to want to hear more about it and watch the shows and all the shorts. So it's a lot that goes into this. As you know, Andrew, for viewers may not know that he has his own podcast as well that he's been doing and trying to keep up with. So between 2 podcasts and a lot of work that he does in writing and media and the support he does, as well as being a parent and having parents that he's helping to help support in their advancing in life, it's a lot, and we often don't know about what goes on behind the scenes, and it's a lot of work. And even keeping a channel up from this end for me has been a labor of love that I do, and I wouldn't trade it. And as well as then doing my day job and parenting and having those issues come up, and other businesses that I continue to work to develop on the side as well. So.
You say labor of love, and I can tell people this because I see the behind the scenes, all that you put into it, and it's great. And really, it's nice to see it paying off. 1 million views is a very, very strong number. And congrats on that. That's awesome.
Well, thanks. Yeah, thanks. So keep on rolling. We're just going to keep on rolling. The biggest thing I did, just for even any other people wanting to start a YouTube channel, is I didn't look at the views. I didn't look at the numbers. Occasionally I would, just to see what's playing and what's hitting or not. And then I was like, I don't want to get involved with this. So because it just can increase that stress. And I always say, if you do what you love, things will work out. Even if they don't work out the way you wanted to, they may have worked out the way that you needed them to. So again, that's kind of my deeper sense of faith in the journey in life. And here I was blown away when I got that email. And even looking in November, seeing it had 333 some thousand views, and in last month in December had over 400 and I don't know 50 or 60,000 views. So just in the last 2 months has been the the breadth of my views, and that's where I'm always wanting to make sure I'm working on creating quality. It's not about the quantity, it's about the quality. And between the music, which I really love creating, as Andrew can attest, I just sent him a song I created yesterday that'll be probably coming out maybe soon or maybe in a month or so. It's a very timely song. It's about, what if we're wrong? What if things we believed in and trusted and thought were true, and people we believed in that told us what they were saying was right and true, or beliefs or attitudes, whether it comes down to politics, religion, family, parenting, all these different issues in our life. We want to really learn to look to believe in ourselves. And I think that's a segue into our episode. Is we're going to be talking about parenting. And the irony is, I have a parenting book. I have my other book. The parenting book is The Art of Empowered Parenting, the manual you wish your kids came with. We have talked about issues with kids. We've never talked about parenting yet in 3 seasons, in the 2 seasons we've done. So I thought, it's time to get more, deeper into my wheelhouse, really that deeper level of what I've written on. And to me, one of the pieces, the important pieces in parenting has to do with attachment. And that is critical. And if we look at a lot of the behaviors our kids are having, they're kind of in that realm of attachment. And I see attachment as not as a binary function. I see it as a spectrum. I see it as analog versus digital. So that's important to look at as well.
Yeah, and I guess attachment is one of the foundational parts of a parent-child relationship, or really any relationship.
Absolutely. Even the relationship that you and I build, it's formed on really building a consistent attachment. And that's where, even in my job, I always want people to know they can expect me to be how I am. And they see that I don't change. So in many ways, I'm helping to heal and resolve damaged and or broken attachments throughout their lives. So I think even whether it's with our kids, our coworkers, our friends, or our parents, sometimes we're healing attachments that were broken with them. Even though we're the child, we can help, rebuild and enhance attachments.
Yeah. All right. Well, as I mentioned, you've got a really great in-depth PowerPoint. And should we dive right into it?
Let's dive right into it.
All right, here we go.
All right. So as you see, attachment in the modern family, foundations of healthy bonds in the digital age. So what we're going to cover in this is, first, we're going to talk about attachment in general. And then we're going to go on to look at attachments, specifically attachment issues related to technology. And those factors are critical that people don't realize. I often say with people that I just had somebody I was talking to the other day that said, I've always thought I had to look for the traumas in my life and the things that happened, and was there big events that happened to me? He says, but there weren't big events. And I said, I often talk to people about the idea of death by a million paper cuts rather than one big knife to behead us. And I think that's what we want to see with parenting, is you can build a relationship with 1,000 and millions acts of love, or you can undermine a relationship with a million or 1,000 acts of distance or disruptions to attachment, or the words that you say. And in that, I'll tell a story I tell people is, there was once a kid, and this is, it's an allegory, but I think there's some validity to it too. There was a kid who always would say things, whatever came to his mind, and just say not nice things to people that were demeaning and or undermining and or hurtful to the people around them. And one day the dad said, he goes, you see that fence out there? He goes, every time you say something to somebody that they felt hurt by, and that you feel hurt them, I want you to take a nail and just put it into that fence. Don't drive it all the way through. Just put it in the fence and leave it out. But you're going to do that every time. So he had his son do that for 3 or 4 months. And he said, look at the fence. And he goes, you see all those nails in there? He's like, yeah. I said, that's how many times that you did or said things and that hurt people. And there were likely more. He goes, now I want you to go to take all those nails out of the fence. And the son takes all the nails out of the fence. And he said, now what do you see on the fence? He goes, well, I see a bunch of holes where the nail were. And he says, right. He goes, that's what's left behind. Even if you take something back and apologize, taking that responsibility for what you said was great. And it still potentially leaves a hole in that person. It still potentially leaves a pain in that person. It affects their ability to maybe trust you. And or what if it bleeds over into trusting other people and other relationships? So I think in that lesson, we want to see the power to create and the power to destroy, and even destruction is creation. Our idea of destruction, the careless things we might say that affect attachments, affects relationship, affect trust, they're creating a belief in a world that we don't feel we can trust, in a world that we don't feel we connect, in a world that might feel inconsistent and then can feel scary, can feel overwhelming. So I think these are the things as we go through this discussion, we want to look at those factors in the formation of attachments. So let's go ahead on and continue with the next slide here. And so what is attachment? Attachment is, first we want to define a connection. Attachment is the process by which a parent and child feel connected, a bond that begins at or before birth. So for viewers, you're seeing this on the screen. For listeners, that's why I'm reading exactly what's on the slide. I'm going to go through the whole slide, and then we'll go back and talk about each slide on the cast. But I'm just going to get through the points in the slide first, so we have a consistent. So first was defining connection. Next, a lifelong journey. It's a constantly evolving state that continues to develop throughout the lifetime of both the parent and child. So what we want to look at is to make sure that we're realizing it's not something that stops when your kids become 18. It's not something that stops because your kids start school and you can now not worry about their connections and things. It's something that we want to realize is that journey throughout life. What's the primary goal? Well, the primary goal is healthy attachment provides the infant with a secure home base from which they feel safe to explore the world. And again, we'll circle around rather than me get into some of the expansion on that point. And the energy of love, it's an emotional investment or energy that can be felt, not noticed, teaching children the fundamental lesson of how to love. So you are their most important teacher of how to love and what love is and what its definition is. And we've had several episodes on the specificity of love. We've had episodes that talked about love-based emotions, fear-based emotions, pain-based emotions. So you are that emissary, that teacher, that professor without realizing or maybe understanding how powerful that role is. So any thoughts on this first slide, Andrew, and things you wanted to?
I mean, what struck me about this, Dr. E, is that how early this begins. Like that in the first thing, it says even before birth, the whole attachment process begins. I think a lot of people, I don't know, just speaking from my own experience, maybe don't approach and think about consciously attachment beginning that early. And being something that needs to be fostered. I feel like maybe people think, well, it's just, you have a little infant baby. So what are you going to do? You're going to hold the baby and hug the baby and do all the things that you do. But I think what you're suggesting here is having a more conscious approach to it and awareness of it.
Right. Even before birth, I can't tell you how many people I work with, I guess, especially when I do the hypnotic work, that realize their issues with trust, attachment, connection began before they were born in some ways. They felt that. And even what we can see through some of the studies on stress related chemicals, hormones that are going on inside the birth mom, they can affect those. And even the shifts at birth when kids are adopted, they potentially perceive that shift in the attachment connection between this body they grew up in throughout the first, their first 9 months, 10 months of development, to then all of a sudden being in another environment, another person, another energy. So that's why I talk about, emotions are energy, love's energy, fear's energy. And if we don't understand the power of that energy, then often we're going to potentially either continue to make mistakes or not realize our power, and or not acknowledge what our kids are feeling, because we're going to think, oh, that couldn't have affected you. You don't even remember that time. Our emotions and memory of our emotions, to me, begins at and before birth. And that's just through 30 plus years of experience.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And so people you've had under hypnosis have been able to conjure up those memories, or are they memories or feelings? What is
I
that?
think that, well, you have to look at often we want to call a memory something that we can verbally report. A lot of times people have memories when they're very young, an infant, before they have words, that are just feelings. So they often dismiss them because they're like, it's just feeling. I don't know where this feeling comes from. Well, we didn't have words to anchor that memory to. So I believe that's why our memories really start to form more after we have words, because words add meaning. Emotions have meaning, though, and we don't have the ability to really express them or explain them. That's why, again, the whole concept of emotional specificity, to help people learn at any stage of their life that each emotion has a purpose, to learn how to filter out the emotions and separate the emotions that the individual felt from what felt like this just big blob of pain or depression or anxiety, that I think it's really important to understand contains many, many specific emotions. And that's what I think it's important to understand and acknowledge for parents, to realize all of the emotions they're feeling in the process of parenting, and all of the emotions their kids may be feeling in the process of being parented. And it's not, you don't have to have it all right and know how to do it all. It's being part of the journey and realizing the power of attachment, and realizing that there can be many times that attachment can be disrupted and affect trust, affect closeness, affect relationships. And I do look back, and this is part of why I wanted to talk about the age of digital age, is I realized, as my daughter got more into computers, and that was her way to connect with friends, and she play games online, we did let her do that. And sometimes that would eat into dinner time, pun intended, but eat into our time together at meals. And we felt her relationship with her friends was important. Whereas then we also realized we need to make sure we're having this family time and predictable time. So that's where we recognize a lifelong journey. Even when she went away from college, we're still working on making sure we maintain healthy attachments, and making sure she knows she can come to us and attach us. And I think parents want to look at, even when their kids are becoming parents, do you have a healthy attachment with your kids? Because it's important then how they will parent their kids. And especially atonement, for real, recognizing I made a mistake when you were growing up. I wasn't as present. I love seeing you be so present with your kids. I want to make sure I'm present with your kids. And or even saying, I realize you may have learned from me, and these are some pointers I might want you, or here's a book to take a look at on really forming healthy attachments, because I don't want you to feel like that I was your only teacher, when I felt that there were times that I was inadequate as a teacher.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're getting into some of, we know how early attachment really begins, and how early
Mhm.
parents should be aware and thinking about it. So what are some strategies here for
Well,
doing it,
I
and
want
how
to keep going. So yeah,
Yeah.
but I want to get back to the, we want to look at that primary goal again. It's not about just looking at providing the attachment with a secure home base. It's also making sure you as a parent feel your own secure home base within yourself. Attachment starts within the parent. It doesn't start within the child. So be aware of that. And, like I touched on before, love is an energy. Every emotion is an energy. It's a frequency, as I say. And, when I look to to quantum emotions and that whole episode. So what the advantage I think we're having of having this discussion now, Andrew, is we've got 2 seasons of content that we're bringing into this, of all the things that I've touched on before, the idea of energy and emotions and relationships, and that idea even of overlapping energy that we'll get into and do attachment styles and parents and parenting styles, versus that idea of 2 separate entities that create the third entity called the relationship. So that was another, that whole model I said of relationships, we learn in our families, we learn from our parents. So that's something to keep in mind as we move forward. So healthy, secure attachment. This is basically being consistently responsive. It's formed when a caregiver is consistent, responsive, and emotionally available to the child's needs. Next one is the child's internal model. Through secure bonds, children learn that they are safe, worthy, and that others can be trusted. Equitable give and take. Remember, I talk about equity versus hierarchy. I'm looking at equity-based parenting models. It's not about power over, it's about power with, and giving those firm guidelines and boundaries and structure. So the parent offers support and comfort while the child offers love in return, creating a sense of empowerment. That is the cycle of love. That's the circle back and forth. It's not all giving and it's not all receiving. Positive outcomes. You want to look at creating positive outcomes. Securely attached children show higher self-confidence, better resilience to change, and fewer signs of psychological dysfunctions throughout life. So that's critical to looking at what are the outcomes we want for our kids and how do we help to create those. So as we go to consistent responsiveness, what we have to look at is a lot of times parents can be inconsistent. They might parent by their mood. And, you know, there's days, like I said, that I've had rough days at work, or I haven't gotten sleep, or, you know, both my wife and I were very careful to be consistent in the way that we raised our daughter so that she could see that we're pretty much going to be the same. You know, we don't, when things don't go our way, we don't yell or scream or get mad. We don't make demands. We make more requests. And if then requests aren't followed, then there are limits, and those limits are consistent. I remember once with her nanny, having to have a talk with her nanny because she was there during the day while my wife worked downstairs in the basement. My wife would come up and eat lunch with our daughter every day, and we needed that help and assistance. But I had to say, I want you to work on your consistency. There's a lot she's getting away with. It's affecting her view of how she was treating my wife, because you look at similar traits. You're looking to see, how can I, if I treat this person this way, can I generalize that to other similar situations? That's just behavioral learning. So we had that talk and helped her to learn why consistency was important. Consistency, follow through, limits, boundaries, all those things. And it wasn't about demanding those things from our daughter. It was about reinforcing them and modeling those things as well in that situation. So
yeah, and that's another variable too. Like, two parents can follow some of what's listed on that slide, but when you bring in secondary caregivers, that can be very tricky, just in terms of style, personality, the fact that somebody's may not be related to that child, but even if they are related, a grandparent, some other family member who may be taking care of it. Grandparents also, I think, are less, they're less likely, to be a disciplinarian or do that reinforcing. They just want to be nice and love their grandkids. Yeah.
And I think can be some value to that. Wow. I think it's also very important for the grandparents not to undermine. I've seen many times when grandparents are purposely undermining the structure that their kids are creating for the grandkids. And that's really important to see the own power issues, as well as then the grandparents still want to be aware of the structure of how to do the discipline, the teaching, and supporting that. I used 1, 2, 3 timeout. My dad didn't get it with the 1, 2, 3, then the timeout thing. And after a while, he started to see it. I remember one day we're driving down the road and my daughter was just having a rough time. I pulled over into a parking lot, took her out of her car seat, and we did a timeout standing out by the car in the parking lot in a safe place. And my dad was like, "Why did you do that?" I'm like, "The behavior had to be addressed in the moment. The consequence is the same every time." He's like, "I don't get it." And she was quiet after that. So I said, "Did it work?" He's like, "Yeah." So I think the thing to realize is, again, even that consistency in when you create that temporal contiguity, the time between the behavior and the time between the consequence, that's important in attachment. Because if your kids feel like they can get away with things and they feel like they have power over you or can manipulate things, that inconsistency is still seen as a consistent response for that individual. So that's why I want to look at that issue of the consistent response. So then what we're going to is that next point is that child's internal model. So what their internal model is if it's, again, an insecure bond, their internal model is for that sense of inconsistency. And then that's going to evoke some of those fear-based responses potentially. And we're all going to go through that process of fear. It's how do we learn how to support fear? How do we learn to read fear? How do we learn how fear affects us? Because it's a natural emotion. It's what we do with it and what we learn about its definition that makes a difference. Now, one of the issues I also see is when we talked about consistent responsiveness in the home. Yes, daycare settings, that becomes a whole nother variable, as well as like I talked about with my nanny, but also then we talked about grandparents. So all these other settings that your child is going into is affecting their own internal model and the ability to for them to shift that. So it becomes kind of variable, extremely variable. Then they're going to start to look in different locations. Well, what do I need to do here? What do I need to do here? What do I need to do here? And I think what we always want to recognize is we are preparing our child for the rest of their life, not the rest of ours. We're wanting to make sure that we're establishing these situations and are helping them to understand things and are helping them to see that life isn't always going to be the same. It's not always going to be predictable. And what can you do when life doesn't feel predictable? And that's, again, we're moving on to the next point of an equitable give and take. So as a parent, you offer support and comfort while the child offers love in return. Well, it's not that we should do something and expect something in return. We want to look at our child's temperament in regards to their attachment too. And that's a whole nother episode, what we'll talk about later. But just to bring up that idea of we all come to this world a little differently. Sometimes our kids might be just like us, or sometimes they might be like one of the parents and not the other. So we have to look at the way that they're programmed to approach the world. But we're trying to offer our sense of support and see that exchange, because that does bring empowerment, because we want our kids to feel empowered in the world, not disempowered. We then want them to feel like people aren't taking power over them, because either that fosters submission and or that teaches them that in order to get ahead in life, we have to have power over others versus power with. And that's critical, because as we see a lot of the things that are going on in our world that are really disruptive, it's the situations where people are seeking power over and they want to be seen as right and strong. And sometimes they don't care about good when they want to be in control. They want to look strong and right and or just strong. And then when they establish strength, then they can define the good and the right of the culture. Be careful not to teach your kids that. Some people believe, well, I'm teaching my kid how to survive in this world. Don't teach them how to survive. Teach them how to thrive. Teach them how to be adaptable, how to, like we said, be resilient, how to help themselves grow through their experiences, not necessarily hide from them. And if your child has a temperament that might be a little avoidant, don't punish that or don't make fun of it or criticize it. Be seeing that you're basically learning, how do I coax this person who naturally feels a little hesitant out of the hole that they might run into or hide in, to feel safe enough to explore the world. And that takes time. That's where you're working on their schedule, not necessarily yours. And I think working on a parent's schedule versus a child really results in a lot of attachment disruptions. So let's get to the next point there. Positive outcomes. Again, you're looking at creating positive outcomes, even outcomes that don't seem or feel positive. You can create a positive outcome by helping them understand, by helping to re-regulate, by making sure that you are giving them hugs and love, even after they've had a timeout to say, I still love you, or even after they've had a timeout, or a consequence, to give them a hug before they have the words. Show them that they're okay. What they did wasn't okay. That's why they're the consequence. But at the core of themselves, they are okay. And as people feel okay within themselves, that's where they have positive attachments. Now, let's look at this positive outcome in its situation as we go through life. Well, my daughter in her middle school years, I've talked about that before, had a rough time. Those times affected her attachments to her peers. her ability to form positive, comfortable attachments to others, to peers, to friends, and even overlaps into boyfriends at times. And we're helping her to then see that she's always been a collector and a connector. She connects people together. When she is in her element and she feels comfortable, then she's just very gregarious and friendly. When she starts to feel threat or fear and trust starts to be affected, then she can call in some of those past behaviors, those past belief systems that lead to those behaviors. We continue to try to help her to foster that healing and reconnection with those disrupted aspects of herself in her healing process, to see that her process is through growth and healing and experience, and that she is continuing to evolve and grow, and that these disruptions always give an opportunity to reestablish healing and to reestablish growth.
Yeah, one thing I'm hearing, Dr. E, here is that this whole attachment thing is really has a long arc to it, really a lifetime. And this couple of the early slides you've shown here are focusing on how it starts, but you keep talking about your daughter who is in college now, and taking it even beyond that, well into maybe when she becomes a parent someday. So
right,
I think it's just a good thing for people to keep in mind as they
absolutely.
as we go through these points.
Yeah, because it's not just about their attachment connection to us. Our attachment fosters their attachment and connection to everyone. And when they have disruptions with attachment with others, we're still that safe base they can come home to and talk to, and or just come home for a night and get some hugs, or and that's something that we continue to do as she has these issues, to help her to see, hey, these are opportunities to learn, to grow, to become, to evolve. So let's get to the next slide here. We have unhealthy, insecure attachment styles. So those are based on, we got that. So we've got anxious attachments, which results from inconsistent responses. Then child learns that they must stay pathologically close to ensure their needs are met. Avoidant attachments forms when the caregivers are emotionally distant or dismissive, I'd say. The child learns to suppress emotions and handle things alone. We have disorganized attachments linked to trauma. The caregivers perceived as both a source of comfort and a source of fear. And reactive attachment disorder is often the outcome of extended, disrupted, insecure, and unhealthy attachment styles, which it is a serious condition resulting from severe neglect or frequent separations. Symptoms include a lack of conscience, uncontrollable rages, and even superficial charm. So what we want to look at with this, let's first, look at the anxious attachments. Often we can have people who develop codependent relationships. They feel afraid of loss. They're very sensitive to rejection, or they can be what I call the preemptive strike. Well, they will end a relationship when they perceive the potential end of it, because they want to feel in control of the distance. So their own anxiousness. Remember the core. Here's a quiz, Andrew. Your last episode. Remember the core emotion of anxiety.
Fear.
More specific.
Dr. E putting me on the spot again.
Yep.
More specific than fear. I can't remember. What is it?
Helplessness.
Helplessness, yes.
So helplessness is a fear-based emotion. The core emotion of depression is helplessness' cousin.
Sadness?
Sounds like helplessness.
Hopelessness.
There you go. Excellent. So remember, that's the world according to Dr. E. So other people might tell you other things, but again, I'm looking at the core emotions that lead to this diagnosis. So when we look at anxious attachments, we look at situations in early life when kids likely felt helpless to have an impact over their relationships. Often people with anxiety are seeking control. People with trauma, that is an anxiety-based post-traumatic stress disorder, is an anxiety-based disorder. I said post-traumatic stress is from a feeling of helplessness with potential guilt and shame and failure, and then can lead to hopelessness in that. So again, we're looking at this early development that can lead to diagnoses down the line when we're looking at the emotions that result from these anxious attachments, even obsessive compulsive disorder. to me, goes to an idea of feeling helpless, an anxiety-based disorder that we look to. So now, as we look at avoidant forms and caregivers are emotionally distant or dismissive, we want to look at that. And this will go to the slide on digital stuff too later. But we want to look at, what are we doing when our kids are around? Are we always working? Are we telling them to leave us alone? You're bothering us. Are we looking at our phone? Are we making dinner and ignoring them? Are we including them in that process? Are we making sure that we're checking in on the things they're doing? Or are we just letting them sit on the phone, the computer, playing and saying, you go play by yourself every day? Those are the things we want to look at that can lead to some of those avoidant and dismissive attachments. And what are the patterns that we're teaching our kids, especially if they come to us when they're feeling hurt and they feel sad or scared, and we're like, I don't have time for you, or go away, or you shouldn't feel that, or what are you angry about? What are you sad about? Those are key phrases that we might say, or parents say, that lead that child to the idea that my parents don't care about how I feel.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you about this, Dr. E. I mean, the emotional distance, dismissiveness, I feel like that can be something that a parent may fall into, but unintentionally so. Like no parent, no good parent really wants to be distant from their child or dismiss their child. But it could happen, right? In terms of, couldn't it happen unintentionally because God, life's so busy, and you got work, you got every other commitment and whatnot, and
Absolutely.
you're making dinner or whatever, like you said, and you just
most of these situations, most of these situations are accidental.
Yes,
are the
that's what I'm
result of
saying.
busy lives and things. There are circumstances, though, where there are parents who intentionally, because of their own psychology and their own dysfunction, intentionally cause and contribute to the pain of their child. And that's just a fact, So we have to look at that and recognize we might not understand why and how that happens. We have to look at the lens of through everybody's eyes and understand where different parents come from. And that's why I think that we're parents really, when people might get pregnant by accident, that's why I support adoption. And I think sometimes families, even with dysfunction, and sometimes especially with dysfunction, say, no, we have to raise this child. We have to keep them in the family. And because they feel like that's what you're supposed to do. And I think families really need to look at their own pattern. Should their child, a parent's child, become pregnant, to look at the pattern of, are we capable of doing this healthy? We see some of the consequences of the results of our child raising, and are we really going to do it differently? And or are we demanding that our child raise that then child that they have had? They should take responsibility for their consequences. What are the consequences to the child or the child? So that's where we want to look at all these issues and look at the dimensionality of it, and realize that if our child doesn't want to have this child, it's going to affect their ability and willingness to form attachments. Now, once they have the child, their attitudes might change. That might be great. And sometimes it doesn't change. So these discussions are really important to look at.
Yeah. So there's certainly those examples, right? Those are maybe some more extreme outlier examples. I'm talking about even like the most everyday, well-meaning parents, I think, still need to be cognizant of these things, that they can, fall into them without even trying, or without it being an extreme circumstance like you just described there.
Right. And that's where, when we get into suggestions, we're talking about being mindful, be mindful of your connections with your kids, and make sure that you're giving them the boundaries to say, okay, now is my work time. And when I'm working, I'd like you to be able to either find something to do or do something this. But it's important to recognize that you're establishing boundaries. And when it's your time with your kids, let it be your time with your kids.
Yeah.
And even if that means telling other people you'll call them back, and that's important, or that a beep on your phone doesn't require that you look at and check it, unless you say, hey, there's an urgent situation going on. So you're establishing a shift in boundary for this circumstance. While it shouldn't be every situation, it should be an outlier that you say, hey, I might have to check this, or might have to do this. I'm sorry, it affects our time. And that's teaching your child accountability.
Yeah, it's interesting, Dr. E. We keep kind of technology keeps coming into this conversation a little, but we haven't even focused on it yet. And I know that's coming.
Exactly. So the disorganized attachments are often linked to trauma. And that's where the caregiver is both seen as a source of comfort and a source of fear. Again, we want to see that in what are we teaching our kids? Are we kind of one of those rubber band parents that were here this time when we're bouncing back this way the other time? And that's not creating consistency. Remember, we talked about how important consistency is. And even like I said, when not only when kids might experience traumas, it's also when parents might experience traumas. And, you know, was mom and or dad available after X, Y, or Z happened? You know, for me, a trauma that happened to our family, as I've talked about, was my brother dying. After my brother died, the first thing my parents did, which I thought was very intuitive, was they kept us out of school the rest of the week. We went to the park all together. We talked. We just spent time together. My dad watched TV that my brother used to watch. He watched the Three Stooges together and just did things. We had people over and talked about it. And my parents did not have, you know, a psychologist to tell them to do this. They just made sure that we had a connection, connected with the family that was remaining. And did things kind of go back to life as it was after that? Yeah. You know, my mom was still home. Did she go through her grieving? Yeah, she did. And my dad did his in silence, which I wish I would have seen some of that, because it taught me to suppress my emotions because I thought I wasn't supposed to cry. And even my mom kept hers in a lot of ways to herself. So I think the thing we want to realize is when we have traumas is how are we processing that? How does a child process it and see it? And are we doing things that increase that or continue that idea of consistency, or does life feel like it drastically changed after that? Does dad and or mom check out, and did they disappear? Did they stop reading me stories? Did they stop giving me hugs? Did they start drinking more? Did they spend more time at work? And often kids will internalize that, whereas even if there's a loss or a death or trauma, they might say, well, I'm too much, or I have to be the good kid so that maybe they'll come around more. So we have to look at what our kids are internalizing. And those come from discussions. Those comes from getting professional help if you feel like you need it. And I think after any situation that could be perceived as traumatic, as feeling traumatic, we always want to make sure we get some outside input. Hey viewers, our episode ran a little long, so we decided to split into 2 episodes. So stay tuned for the next episode to pick up where we left off. And until next time,